welcome everyone. My name's Karen Alcock. I've been asked by SME for Labour to support and assist chairing the event this evening. So I'm here really just to make sure you'll get a chance to answer questions and make this a pleasant and informative evening. Lord Khan has got to disappear, but we're very, very privileged to have him here this evening as the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State in the, I'm going to get this right now, the MHCLG. Long acronyms, they keep changing. But again, very much welcome you arriving. I think you're here to say a few words and then take some questions before we need to zoom off. So I'm going to hand straight over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, and it's an honour to be here. Thank you, Paul, for the work you chair in the Land Planning Development Federation. I've got that right, LPDF. And I know a lot of members are here in particular, so I know you have strategic approach to your assets and land investments. And I want to thank you first for what you're doing in supporting the country, for your continuous perseverance in difficult climates, that you're still adding significantly and substantially to the very bedrock for our country. And I'm here, as Karen introduced, I'm one of the ministers in MHCLG. Housing has been a huge issue. As you may have heard from the Deputy Prime Minister's comments yesterday, we're going to build 1.5 million houses. And I know that's a tough ask, it's a big challenge. But one thing I've realised about the Deputy Prime Minister, she often gets underestimated and she's good at proving people wrong. That is her brand, and she's very determined to do it. There's been a big national planning policy framework consultation taking place, which is coming to an end soon. We're out there, we want to get our sleeves rolled up and get into the communities. In particular, I cover faith, resettlement, communities, and now I've also been given regional investment. So it's really important to recognise how we can get our regions invested. And let me say something very clear to you all. As I recently visited the Northeast, Hartlepool, Middlesbrough, Sunderland, when you cover communities, you get people giving you the honest, candid answers. It actually dawned upon me the challenges ahead, and it's great to see my colleague Rupa Huck here, who's been a long-standing MP but has a lot of expertise in these areas in particular through her work here. So look, colleagues, I want to take a lot of questions from people, but I want to just reassure colleagues, friends in the room, that this government is going to build, it's going to recognise the challenge ahead. We're going to bring forward the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which was mentioned in the King's Speech. Matthew Pennycook, many of you will know. I know him very personally. I was also, when I was working on the Renters Reform Bill and the Leasehold Bill when I was in opposition. We want to make sure that we create a system which is fair, but also which is needed. We're just hearing from the MP for Gateshead and Wickham, and he was telling me a lot of the new MPs were of the generation that can't get on the property ladder, the housing ladder. And I look at the settlement that comes into my particular area, that we realise that there's not enough houses, and there are people obviously fleeing conflict, that we are a compassionate country and supporting people, but we recognise the fact that there's not enough houses, and we all got to work together in this. And we can't do this without the great people around in this room. So please keep informing us, keep talking to us. That relationship is so important, and I finish off by saying that we are one of the most centralised countries in the OECD list of countries. So we've got power to hand back power to local authorities, combined authorities, to ensure that local authorities are working with house builders, strategic investors, strategic land investors, but also in particular, in this case, the National Planning Development Federation and all its members, because we need you at that table with equal partnership. That's the message I'm giving you, equal partnership. The days have gone where people sitting in Westminster Whitehall knows what's best in different regions and different areas. But we know you're there, you're vested there, you've got the expertise there. We need to ensure that's part of all the, as we know, devolution deals coming through, English devolution bill. And we need to ensure that as much as we can get people across to have a devolution deal, which we know is part of a combined authority, working with people in the area with local expertise and filling them gaps. And we're determined to do that, as you saw some of the announcements by the Deputy Prime Minister. I want to pay a huge tribute to SME Labour in particular, that man there, Ibrahim Douglas, his team, I see Fran, I see you, Shahid Nadeem, all of you, for making sure that Labour Party is a party to make sure we're working with business, we're pro-business, we want to make sure that we get our growth right. Let's get the elephant in the room, there's some difficult decisions to make, tough decisions, and we want to make sure that we can balance our books to ensure we have a growing, strong economy which is sustainable, which has a long-term approach. And as somebody who has a remit for regional investment, I know the importance of working together and listening to concerns and actually making the changes and policies to ensure we can get the faster growth through house building, through making sure that's both social housing, affordable housing and quality housing. We need to raise the aspirations of people to get onto the housing ladder earlier. And I finish off with a quote from my mother, and she always says to me, like, the life should be in the way that the next generation does better than the previous generation. And she says it's quite stark that this next generation's not getting the opportunities that the previous generation. So something's gone fundamentally wrong, and housing crisis is there. We have to avert that. When we avert the housing crisis, build more homes, we'll be able to look at the wider social context. So thank you very much indeed, and happy to take questions. Thank you.
If you could maybe indicate, put your hand up, and very happy to make comments or questions, but maybe introduce yourself and where you're from before you make the comment. So I'm looking around to see if anybody would like to ask a question or comment for the Minister.
Thank you for that. David Brocklebank, Waits, we've introduced ourselves. Really warming, everything you've had to say there is really warming and reassuring, where as a sector we've come from a really difficult maybe 5 years under the previous government, we're not going to talk about them too much, and everything that happened to planning, which goes to the heart of investment and creativity and driving housing forward. So that the comment from us is that everything we've seen and heard to this point around the changes in planning, it's just been pretty uniformly applauded by the sector, and that is, more than we expected. I think it would be fair to say. In some of the conversations we've been having, the message of stay the course, where we know locally new housing with new infrastructure is still a difficult message. So stay the course with these changes, and particularly, you represent certain councils of a certain colour, particularly in the very constrained parts of the country, delivering new housing, and actually, 2/3 of councils haven't got plans. And what we really want to understand is what the government is going to do with those authorities that are just not quite on the programme at the moment in terms of creating plans and facing up to the housing needs that we have. That's the question.
So to come together.
Yeah, we could do. She'll take a bundle. Is there any comments? Start. Yeah, please.
Hello, Murad Qureshi. I used to be an Assembly member at City Hall, London. In my political life, the most successful entity which produced housing was a government quango called the Housing Corporation. And I think there's scope for them to be set up again, particularly some of the fiscal incentives they gave for residents to move on, which I don't think is something we've looked into outside of the planning and supply side of things. Is that something the government would look into if it could be shown that previously it was actually quite good at delivering things and reported well to the Commons?
It's nice to take them in bundles of 3. Is there any more before we ask the Minister to respond? Let's go. Let's go for the... there's 2.
Okay, thank you. Oh, okay, there's one there.
Apologies, I didn't see that go up.
Sorry, I'm not going fast enough, that's why.
I don't mind. I've got any questions, it's important.
Yep. Thank you very much. My name is Shahid Nadeem. I'm a councillor based in Southend City Council. And I'm really glad to hear, it's not a question, just a comment, glad to hear which Lord Wajid reassured that the government is working hard to make sure the need of the planning regarding the planning, renters bills, and all those things. And as the Deputy Prime Minister announced in terms of the housing, because South End is also one of those areas where we need lots of housing. So I'm glad to hear about it. I'm sure in the due course there will be more developers and relaxation from the government side, which could help the planning application, and processing time span will be reduced, and people will have a more decent housing in accordingly. Thank you.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. My name's Annie Jingle. I'm from Tetlow King Planning, and I'm an affordable housing expert witness. Within the Labour proposals at the moment, there is a massive focus on social housing, which is obviously supported and long overdue. However, one of the massive issues that's facing the industry at the moment is the lack of RP interest in Section 106 affordable homes. 50% of our affordable homes are delivered through Section 106 agreements, and at the moment there's no clear indication from government how funding is going to be brought forward to deliver the 50% social rent on the Greenbelt, and how we're going to get those social homes delivered on the ground. There's been many discussions from both sides of the room about whether it's deliverable or not, but land values aside, if we could get 50% affordable homes, the predominant amount being social rent, what is Labour going to do to help the housing associations deliver these homes in the short term, so that the 1.5 million people on housing registers can actually find a home within the next Parliament? Annie.
Thank you, everybody, for them questions. Some of them quite technical, so I'm just gonna I'll take them on board and delegate to other colleagues. But listen, first of all, David, look, we're talking about how local authorities are going to do their bit. The mandatory house targets are being discussed, but I think there's an element of making sure that the local growth plans, which Alex Norris is working on, local growth plans, that every local authority, combined authority, are working to ensure that the local growth plans looks at sufficient housing and adequate housing on a needs basis as well. So there's some parts of the country, like levelling up was an interesting phrase because people never knew what it meant. There were different definitions of levelling up. There are parts of the country that have huge demand. There are parts of the countries that have huge scope to put housing there as well. But we've got to, it's all going to fit in with our proposed the new towns and the investment zones, and we've got to get that right. But so the point we will make there is to ensure that the planning process, which links into the point that Shahid made as well, but we've got to make sure that that culture is fundamentally changed. And like we know around this room that some of the delay in planning decisions have meant it's caused so much pain, economic pain, frustration, and it's caused in reality ultimately a loss of investment in areas, and that surely is a no-brainer for ourselves to avert, and it's no good for anybody. So we've got to change that. That process has got to be smooth, efficient, more planners. We've got to make sure that the planning promise to ensure we get more planning is not, the budget's not, it's actually ring-fenced. So it's not used in other areas by local authorities where they see there's another gap we can use them. We need to make sure that money is actually for planning. And there's a new convoluted approach that has to be on the very need of the day, which is a housing crisis. That's exactly how I'm going to describe it, because that's exactly how people tell us from like yourselves across the country. So culture change in planning process, local authorities change of approach, strategic direction, and government's going to be working with local authorities to ensure that we work with them to get their targets. Because no one can look at this and think, this is not my problem. Local authorities are going to recognise that these are people's lives, it's the next generation, and we're all going to play our part. So I've answered your particular point as well, Shahid, in making sure, like David said, we kind of focus in the local in growth plans, but also local authorities and combined authorities. As part of devolution deals, this is something that needs to be discussed. I can't preempt what devolution deals are going to be for certain areas, but I can say that housing is going to be at the very pinnacle of them discussions. Murad, you talked about the London Housing Corporation. I'll take that idea back, because look, if there's ideas and actually experience and projects that have worked, why wouldn't we not take that into consideration? So you can, take heart from there's a new government task force for new towns. In particular, they've already been to Milton Keynes and seen how that's coming to fruition. We have to build them new towns. Look, the elephant in the room, if I be quite frank, Annie, some of them points are very impertinent, but I can't really comment on that this moment of time because it's a spending review. But what I can say, hearing your points, rest assured, they're the exact points that ministers are discussing. I'm sure when there's a discussion with Treasury, because there's going to be, let's be quite frank here, the fiscal environment is quite difficult at the moment. There's £22 billion hole to fill, and that's the reality. But how we get the right amount of social housing, how we support that, and at what levels, and how we bring the stakeholders involved. I'm pretty convinced I can say to you, the consultation is going to be quite strong. We can't build the social housing without looking at working with experts around this particular area. But what I can't say is how we're going to be divvying out our budgets, distributing our budgets, because that's a discussion, a negotiation to be had with Treasury. Finally, if I may, before I shoot off, is I'm going to have a bit of my dessert. It's just thank you very much for all the work you do. I mean it from the bottom of my heart, and they say when you speak from the heart, you speak to the heart. To say that you're all very, very valued people. I know you're having a session tomorrow, Paul, with Matthew Pennycook. I always say to Matthew Pennycook, the running joke in the ministerial offices, Matthew just reads much more than the civil servants read, and I think his knowledge is like immense in this particular area. I'm the one that goes out into communities. I went to Southport, Leeds, Hartlepool, Sunderland, Middlesbrough, Nottingham. I've been everywhere out there, and that's meant I've been able to hear firsthand of the difficult challenges that communities face. And what we do need to recognise is that partnership of government, of central government with local authorities must include important people like yourself. And I'm happy to, my door's always open. I say this to both yourself, Paul, Karen, and other colleagues. Please, if you're feeling that you're not getting anywhere, just reach out to me. Let me know. I work very closely with Matthew Pennycook and Baroness Taylor, unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. We've got a lot of issues. You saw what happened in Grenfell. You saw some stark reminders to where unfortunately we don't keep the eye on the ball. We end up in a situation like that. There's a lot of issues on building safety, cladding, but also ultimately, I want to finish off by saying this to you. In them conversations, in the stark, candid conversations I heard frustration. Now, whoever undertook crime and got involved in violent disorder, they paid a very strong price. But there were also a lot of people out there who, with their children, were on the protest, and it's important to have them conversations with them people as well, because they are feeling like actually there's so much mistrust in the system. That's not just with the political system, that's with the wider system. They think society is not rewarding them, and of course violence is not the answer, and that's why you face the full face of the law. But there's too many conversations had on Downing Street. Prime Ministers, successive Prime Ministers have said we need to look after those that have been left behind, and then we move on to those who are just about managing. We've got to realise that housing plays a huge role in averting homelessness, in averting wider economic, social issues and public issues, service issues. So we've got to recognise that as part of the solution, as part of the jigsaw, we know that good quality housing and more housing is important and essentially and necessary. And we confirm with you that that is our pledge. We'll be out there in the communities. Matthew Pennycook's there talking about it. I will pass the messages on, and Baroness Taylor's doing the work in the House of Lords. Rest assured, please, our doors are open. We have an open door policy, and that offer is there continuously. And I want to say last thing to you. I keep saying I say a lot of things to you, but there's something about. But on a positive note, you see around the conference this week. In 11 weeks, we've got a lot of things done. Even in this sector, we're getting out there and making sure that we can have a long-term approach to this. We know there's a tough challenge ahead. Like you saw what happened in 2019, and the government was in a big healthy majority, and 2024 that all capitulated. Politics is volatile, but for me it's not just about politics, it's about the next generation. It's the future of our country, and I know all of you around the table are part of that solution. I know you have the expertise. We don't always get it right, we don't always know best government. What we do want to do is make sure we have the opportunity to have the discussions with people that know better, and know best. And I can just say, I pledge to you that we'll continue that conversation. Thank you very much indeed.
Lord Khan, thank you very much indeed for those words. I think I'd echo what David basically said, which is we've spent 5 years attending a different conference and feeling as if we've been speaking to the hand. And it's absolutely refreshing to come to a Labour Party conference, a conference of a party in government, and actually it feels like a housing conference with politics on the side. And that is just a huge change in approach. And we are finding it very, very refreshing indeed. We will continue to support you in your efforts. We wish to see more land come forward, more planning consents, more homes built, more affordable homes, and economic growth. So in everything that you do over the next 5 years, but actually the clock's ticking, so things need to change very quickly. So we'll be there supporting you, trying to guide you in certain aspects, but you have our wholehearted support as an industry. So thank you for your time this evening. I know you've now got to go off to another event with the Deputy Prime Minister, but thank you for the time that you've spent with us. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Nick Johnson, who's Mayor for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and I'd like to understand his views on the direction of travel and the expectations of our sector at a more regional level. I know we're not allowed to use the word regional planning, it's strategic planning, but in that context I would be interested, and I think our members would, to understand your views. Rupa, I think we'll come to you as well, if you don't mind, just to understand the views of perhaps the Parliamentary Labour Party as a whole, and just how bought into the message of new homes and housing delivery the party is on a wider basis. But if we can, we'll start with Nick, and maybe take a few questions.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to come and speak. Quick introduction, Mayor Dr. Nick Johnson, so a combined authority mayor, a mayor that doesn't have a gold chain and hangs around occasionally with Andy Burnham and Sadiq Khan. And 4 days into the new government was invited down to Downing Street for the first time. A huge step change in terms of my own personal experience being a Metro mayor over the last 3 and a bit years. And I think in some ways a very clear demonstration of where the government shows its priorities in terms of ongoing devolution, and within that, you know, the delivery of housing targets. There's no secret, being from Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, that we had the benefit of quite a lot of attention from the previous government. Secretary of State Michael Gove rather ruined one of my Sundays when he made an announcement, or a leak came along to say that they plan to put 250,000 homes, you know, within sort of 5 miles of Cambridge City. That was moderated. We now have what's called the Case for Cambridge, but I would say that there's been a complete reboot. I've had the benefit of many a conversation with Matt Pennycook, and in terms of, I can only speak about what is expected in the area that I represent. We're ambitious. Why wouldn't we be? In Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, particularly with the jewel that is Cambridge City, which drives an international expertise in life sciences, and actually within the combined authority is one of the few combined authorities that actually is a net donator to UK PLC. Why wouldn't you want to get behind this combined authority? I think I actually learned quite a lot from what Wajid was saying. What I would say to you is it seems to me that obviously the narrative about combined authority, it's often talked about the northern mayors. There are more than just northern mayors. You've obviously got the West Midlands, you've got the West of England, and at the moment just the one combined authority in the East of England, and of course Sadiq in London. But some of the kind of thinking processes about what you want to deliver in terms of number of houses, the delivery of social housing, very much part of the ambition of a Labour government, Labour mayors. But in my area, we have to think slightly more strategically, and certainly with that, the idea that we need to start really thinking about spatial planning is something I would really welcome. I think there are other delivery vehicles that are an option within combined authorities. They are Mayoral Development Corporation. I would highlight the example of Stockport within the Greater Manchester Combined Authority area. Certainly something I think is worth exploring within the area of Cambridge. Obviously, we already do have the Cambridge Delivery Group, as led by Peter Freeman, who's a man I've come to know very well from Homes England. I guess I haven't got any kind of major insights, but there's a couple of things I've been asked when I've spoken at these things. For you as an industry, as a kind of thing, what does the Labour government want? Well, what you need to try and do, and I've kind of explained this before, is get into the mind of the Secretary of State for Local Government, Angie Rayner. Think about her journey. Think about where she came from. Think about how she says that's what she wants to see for her communities, not just her own constituency. She wants to see that for the whole of the United Kingdom. A lot of that just resonates very well within the kind of narrative of combined authority mayors. And combined authorities now cover just over 50% of the United Kingdom. I'm looking forward to the announcements that are coming out. You know, the potential for multi-year settlements, one big kind of cross-departmental funding. We'll probably see that first in Manchester, West Midlands, but we're all snapping at the heels. We want to do the same thing in Cambridge and Peterborough's West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire. I think the biggest challenge is, in some ways, the narrative as articulated by Wajid is the one that the combined authorities want to deliver. I don't know about the areas that aren't covered by combined authorities. And ironically, a lot of them are in the south. So I'm not here because I've got any insight. I just really want to focus on my own area. I want to deliver improved infrastructure. I want to deliver the ambitions of a Labour government. I do think that there is a narrative in my own eastern region area. Norfolk and Suffolk were pushing for some form of devolution, but it's fallen by the wayside. I think combined authorities are the way to go. I would say mayoral combined authorities are the way to go. Well, I would do that, wouldn't I? Because that's kind of what I'm trying to articulate. And hopefully that will come sooner rather than later. But if you want to put your best investments anywhere, go to where the combined authorities already exist. There's a lot of them in the north. There's definitely one here in the east, which is Cambridge and Peterborough, and we've already got the attention of central government. We really want to run the show, I think, with the new powers, delivering for communities, driving the ambitions, and that narrative of really caring, really cooperating, and delivering for a community. The narrative I said when I got elected was this mantra of 3 C's in public service, in public decision making, in policy making. It's all about compassion, it's all about cooperation, and then you deliver for a community. My background is as a medic. I learned all my my professional thing is as an NHS doctor. I found myself working within government, local government, and I strongly, strongly believe that when you work at local government level and you are seen to really care, you care about the quality of the housing, you care about the options and the opportunities that people have within communities and how they are connected around the infrastructure. It's no good having loads of houses if you haven't got a good infrastructure to get you to the jobs and the employment opportunities. When you can demonstrate that at a local level, the compassion, you get the kind of buy-in, you get the cooperation, and then you deliver for your community. I think that is coming out in bucket loads, and I think the trailblazers are people like Andy Burnham, and to some extent, and this is going to sound a little bit contentious, what Andy Street was trying to achieve in the West Midlands, but obviously Richard Parker is going to supercharge in terms of the West Midlands. You can see around here, Steve Rotherham, this is what he wanted to do at a sort of local level through combined authorities. So if you're welcome, thank you for inviting me to come and speak. If you're interested in particularly the area I represent, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, I'm here to speak to you tonight. And if you've got any sense and thoughts about the future, look towards combined authority, because that's where it's at.
I think let's go to Rupa for a few words, and then we'll combine the questions at that point.
Hi, thanks ever so much. I'm Rupa Huck, Labour MP for Ealing Central and Acton. And you've had a peer of the realm, you've had a Metro Mayor, so now you get a backbench MP, and I'm in my 9th year, so I'm not even a shiny new one. Sorry, I'm a bit of a shop-soiled old one. But look, what I have done in my time is an advice surgery every Friday. And it has showed me that Tony Blair said, education is the issue of the day. Over 9 years, I've seen it's housing. So I'll be doing it again, when is that? In a couple of days' time on Friday. And pretty much every case that comes through the door. And Ealing, it's a sort of affluent West London suburb, queen of the suburbs it was known as. So it may be housing disrepair, housing overcrowding, damp and mould, middle class people whose children can't afford to get on the ladder, people who are equity rich, cash poor, time poor, all those kind of things. And in 2015, you would have 1 minute people complaining about the bedroom tax, the under occupancy, then the next minute complaining about the mansion tax, because somewhere like Ealing, £1 million isn't unusual, £2 million for a detached house or whatever. So how do we solve this? Well, we have a very ambitious and realistic target of 300,000 new homes each and every year of this Labour government. And we need homes of every type of tenure. So it is a very natural impulse for people to want to get their foot on the ladder. But at the same time, social housing, council housing, safe and secure tenancy, those kind of things. We're lucky that in London, where Murad was an assembly member for many, many years, we have Sadiq Khan. So we've been very forward on this compared to the rest of the country. But it was good to hear from the good Lord Wajid, who's gone now, that, we have a Secretary of State who grew up in social housing herself, so she gets it. And as you said, for many years you were banging, 15 years you were banging your heads, 14 years, was it, against a brick wall with, I think of the number of PMQs I asked on things like, when are you going to end the Section 21 no-fault evictions? I remember asking one guy, I don't know, we had so many Prime Ministers in my time, and I was saying, winter's coming, it's getting cold, Gove, people like that, warm words, but what did we get? And again, I remember early on asking a question about private sector landlords. I think 1 in every 4 Tory MPs at the time was. So that's why we had this huge imbalance with housing benefit instead of actual social ownership homes. And, this big racket that went on. So look, some of the plans we have in our current manifesto, which are now proposals for government, I need to stop saying shadow minister, they're actual ministers now. Things like placemaking, so these things shouldn't just be, a building, but we need to look at things like public realm and amenities, all those kind of things. Things like new towns I'm very excited about. So the Milton Keyneses, the Stevenages, the Runcorns of the future, so these things are properly planned, as opposed to just shove a thing where there's a bit of space. Things like de-designated stuff that's called Greenbelt. We have it in my own borough, bits of scrubby old scrubland that aren't lush. You think of Greenbelt, it sounds like rolling fields and green and pleasant land. So if it's not Greenbelt, why not use it, brownfield sites, greybelt, those things, to build on? Things like stopping land banking. I've seen it in my own seat. People buy a thing, sit on it for years, it's held up. So yes, we do need to get rid of unnecessary regulation. But at the same time, I'm a West London MP. My boundary borders W10. From bits of my seat, you can see Grenfell. So we know the dangers of completely poo-pooing regulation at the same time, seeing all those things, health and safety, as meddlesome. Because 72 lives were needlessly lost in one of the richest boroughs in the 6th largest economy on earth. So all these things we need to put in the mix, and there are things like 2 means of escape that for high-rise buildings the fire service can come up with the hoses and people can get out on the other. Things like that I don't think we should scrimp on. And I like a hard hat visit. I can do my George Osborne impression and get in the high vis, go up. I want to see more of those in the right places. My seat probably wouldn't be there without public transport. As I say, it was classic commuter land at one stage. We've got all these things where sort of in the Heathrow flight path, we're also HS2 land. So Old Oak, you hear about this fabled Old Oak, that is in my seat. 26,000 dwellings going to come there. It'll be like a new town. So that presents enormous opportunities. What else? Crossrail, or it's called the Elizabeth line now, isn't it? All these things, all these big infrastructure projects seem to come through my seat. So, and I've got a tube station with every compass point and the word Acton in it. North, south, east, west, Acton Central, Acton Main Line even, we've got the lot. So, I'm sorry, I'm not the tourist board for Ealing and Acton, sounds a bit like I am. So 300,000 homes. Let's stop that situation where I think one of the early speeches I did in 2015 was covered in the Evening Standard. The headline they chose was MP slams the Who Stole My Cheese generation. And what I meant by that is adults, I've got a lot of private rented sector in my seat, adults in their 30s plus who are in these shared homes. Do you know what I mean? They have one room. It's not really a life at an age like that when traditionally people are putting down roots, having families, and you're terrified someone's going to nick the cheese out of the fridge. It's not, do you know what I mean? We need to get out of this stunted form of growth that happens. Maybe it's a very London thing. I'd be interested to hear from Cambridge, where I was a student a long, long time ago in the last century, if that happens there, because I know there's cost of living pressures and it's very expensive there as well. So anyway, look, I can go on and on if you really want. I used to be an academic. However, there is an old saying, isn't there? An Englishman's home is his castle. Let us make that reality, but not just for the men. And they can be hyphenated English as well. They can be Welsh, they can be from other parts of these isles. But men, women, children, housing should be a human rights issue. Do you know what I mean? A roof over your head is not too much to ask. In the 6th richest economy on earth, we've got an ambitious programme. This government is going to unblock a lot of stuff. Thank goodness we've got rid of Gove and all that lot. Let's do this. And happy to take questions. But as I say, I am a backbench, humble person and low down in the food chain, so I can't promise to know everything. Thanks.
I think we'll end the evening's proceedings there. There's a bar outside, so I'm sure I can expect some of you to linger a bit longer. But I'd like to thank Rupa, Mick, for your time this evening, and Karen as well. I think we got a bit sidetracked, but thank you very much indeed, both all of you, for your time. Thank you.